Was Prince Harry caught in a web created by Meghan Markle to ensnare him or basically any other British guy that she could get to look her way? Hello everyone, welcome back to Royal News Network. My name is Brittany and today I am doing part 2 of my kind of analysis of Tom Bower's new book on Harry and Meghan. Yesterday I did a video kind of covering mostly Meghan and kind of her basically desire and drive to be famous. That's Meghan's sole goal in life, is to be as infamous as possible, to have as much money as possible with doing the least amount of work possible. Yes, that is Meghan Markle. She basically bought her way into the British monarchy through social climbing and basically paying her PR team tons and tons of money to just promote her enough so she could get from point C person to point B person to point A person. And unfortunately, that poor soul happened to be Harry. And this is where I think it gets kind of, very interesting. Thankfully, Tom doesn't do like a huge deep dive into Harry's childhood. Obviously, that's been covered many, many times. I don't think there's probably much else he could have added in that arena. But there are a couple things that he talked about that I thought were really, really insightful into where Harry was. Because as it turns out, Harry was in the perfect place to be snared by Meghan's just web. And it's just really, I think, both sad and just a reflection of where Harry was and how kind of broken he was and how Meghan really took advantage of a guy who really just had kind of no defense mechanism around him. So, I mean, there's a couple things. Harry was utterly desperate to find a wife or a girlfriend, but he was also kind of a bore and a terrible boyfriend. So he was trying to find a girl to fill this slot, but most of the women he had tried dating were, Chelsea Davy, who I think actually loved him for him, had to put up a ton of his boorish behavior, and she decided she didn't want the royal fold, and he wasn't man enough to say, you know what, honey, I'll go with you. Let's leave this thing together. We can totally do it. He wasn't man enough to do that. So apparently he really, just kind of needed somebody to latch onto. And unfortunately for him, that person was Meghan Markle. Because again, she was spinning this web of kind of deceit about who she was through all this social climbing, rewriting her history constantly, in order to find a rich British man, because she could not probably find a rich American man. So she really needed to skip continents in order to find her best target. And again, she was able to social climb and kind of get introduced to Harry. But I think looking back at Harry's history, obviously there's this huge tragedy with the death of Diana. However, there's two different ways that William and Harry kind of looked at it. And I think William took the very, very mature route, and I think it served him exceptionally well in terms of who he married. So to begin with, Meghan, of course, did a deep dive into Harry. So she told one of her publicists, "I've Googled Harry. I've gone really deep into his life." Nelthorpe Crown was left in no doubt that Meghan had carefully researched every aspect of Harry and his past life. She understood precisely the man she was meeting: needy, volatile, unhappy, and seeking a soulmate. Now, I'm not the person I don't believe in soulmates. I think people can fall in love. I don't think there's one person in the whole world that you are destined for. And I think it's kind of this myth that Harry and Meghan have built around themselves, which was always going to crack and fall apart because it doesn't really exist, is that they were soulmates because Harry had to change himself so much to meet her definition. And her definition was a facade because most of her history and everything she told him was not true. And so I think there is a dichotomy there and a terrible chasm where Meghan was able to give Harry the facade he needed, but that wasn't actually her. And so ergo, the person he married, his soulmate, doesn't actually exist. Who Meghan actually is not his soulmate. It's a completely different person to a certain extent. Because again, it sounds like through this whole thing, Meghan had spun herself into exactly what he needed, exactly what he wanted. But as a man who just doesn't really know what he wants, this is kind of an incredibly dangerous path. He was desperate. He wanted to believe in the romance of that. And I think there's a huge naivete in Harry, and especially how he relates to his mother's death. So it says, the brothers grew up convinced that the media had killed their mother. Saintly Diana, in their opinion, was destroyed by journalists who pursued her relentlessly. For years, the paparazzi had chased and provoked their mother for profit. A single photograph could be worth thousands of pounds. She had fallen victim to their dishonesty. Neither prince wanted to accept that Diana played the media for her own advantage. Regularly, she tipped off photographers about her whereabouts and posed for pictures. She eagerly collaborated with journalists to wreak revenge on Charles, especially with Andrew Morton, the Daily Mail's Richard Kay, and Martin Bashir, on the basis of his deception. Her motives were complex and sown during her own unhappy childhood and later as she tried to pick up the pieces of her wrecked life. Neither son understood what those close to Diana witnessed, their mother's remorseless self-destruction. And so if you think about that, Harry's idea and image of Diana, to a certain extent, he has bought into the media facade of her to a certain extent as well. So what happens when somebody dies exceptionally young is they're kind of sanctified by kind of the media. And there's some truth in that. Of course, Diana was a wonderful, lovely person. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that sometimes people's flaws get completely just tarped over in order to magnify their good qualities. So yes, Diana had many wonderful, amazing qualities, but like any human being, she was deeply complex, deeply broken, and she was oftentimes her own worst enemy. And to William's utter and complete credit, he did what he should have done, and Harry did the opposite. So Bauer points out, during his 20s, William visited his mother's family and friends to try to fill in the gaps about Diana. Harry resisted that disturbing tour. He preferred to believe the Hollywood fiction that his mother had been murdered by the paparazzi's relentless pursuit of her into the Paris tunnel. I think it was a classic case of don't let yourself think about your mom, he would later explain, and the grief and the hurt that comes with it, because it's never going to bring her back and it's just going to make you more sad. My way of dealing with it was just to basically shut it out, locking it out. Now, I completely, believe and sympathize with Harry losing his mother at a young age. I cannot imagine what that was like. And Bauer talks about as well as that Charles just was not in the best place either. He was also mourning Diana. He didn't quite know what to do. He also really wanted to pursue his relationship with Camilla. Now, you could say that, you don't like Charles and Camilla, that's fine, but I also kind of understand from an adult perspective, he was ready to get on with his life. And both he and Diana were when she died. And so kind of her death kind of pulled them all back into the War of the Waleses, which was not the best for anyone. Sorry, my dogs are fighting down below at my feet, which is kind of funny. So Harry was this deeply broken man, and he did not, again, have this good sense and understanding of who his mother really was. He had the childlike view of her. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I deeply admire William for saying, you know what? Let me find out who my mother really was beyond what I knew. William had already seen a bit of the inconsistencies in her character, that she would complain about the paparazzi yet engage with them. So William was kind of aware of Diana's kind of self-promotion in that way, and he was sometimes frustrated by that. So William was kind of more aware of, as you get older as a child, you kind of see your parents' flaws in different lights. When you're a teenager, your parent says, well, you can't go someplace, and, you're like, oh, my parents are so terrible. But as an adult, you kind of realize, oh, I see X flaw, I see this flaw. And it's more coming from an adult's perspective. Harry never went through therapy probably when he should have, and he continued to believe this myth of his mother, rather than William's much more adult, mature perspective of really trying to understand her and understand how her flaws contributed, to her life and her struggles. And he made the decision to do the exact opposite. He went for a woman who had a stable family, a stable upbringing, and look at them and their kids now. Catherine and William are thriving. They're closer now than ever, I think. I think they did have some rough patches early in their marriage. There's been a lot of talk that William perhaps maybe wanted to really marry somebody else, but kind of settled for Catherine. Either way, they are each other's best friends, and their connection with their children is so obvious that it's just impossible to deny. And it's beautiful to see that William has found happiness that his mother probably would have given her life for. She would have loved to see that, and how he was able to break the pattern. Harry instead, I feel like, is repeating the pattern that started with his mother's parents and then her parenting and now his as well. Again, I can't totally speak to his parenting, I guess I should say. But it seems like Harry is kind of perpetuating kind of the hurt and chaos rather than William, who's going for the stable. And I think as the stable has gone on for William, he's become more and more stable, more and more secure in his destiny as king, because he is not burdened by, thinking of his mother as a saint, really. Rather, he thinks of her as a whole person and a woman. And I feel like he does understand her. And obviously deeply, deeply misses her. So please understand that, if all that makes sense. So it is a complicated dynamic, but you can see how William really tried to understand what happened, whereas Harry wanted to go with the fantasy. And I guess, according to Bauer, those close to Harry believed that he had long harbored a fantasy to be told what to do by a woman. In his search for maternal sympathy, Meghan promised to be an understanding mother figure as well as an adoring lover. For the first time in Harry's life, he was prepared to obey a woman. To secure Meghan's loyalty, he would change himself to match her expectations. And again, guys, I see huge, huge red flags with that, because that means Harry has basically changed, and it goes on, Tom Bauer describes basically everything about himself in order to please Meghan. And that's just not a sign of a healthy relationship. You should not have to change every aspect of yourself, to please whoever you're trying to date. And Harry's desperation, which Meghan clung to for a very specific reason, which I'll get to later, and it just kind of continued, and you even see now Meghan's continued mothering of him, because again, she knew this mother wound of his and she exploited it for her own advantage. So when the news broke that Harry and Meghan were dating, so Harry immediately went to the Diana narrative. He wanted the connection, and so did Meghan, to Diana. So what was happening to Meghan, you can debate, how much racism was actually involved, or whether some of the articles, the titles were just in poor taste, but Meghan and Harry just went relentlessly to this. Meghan is the next Diana. She is going to die just like Diana did, unless everybody changes everything to please Meghan. So this is what it says. In order to pacify Meghan's anger, Knaf agreed to issue a statement on Harry's behalf, damning the media for their description of Meghan. Harry dictated the sentiments for Knaf to fashion a statement, committing Knaf to a conundrum. Meghan demanded that the statement should reflect the parallel her potential fate and Diana's. Knaf suggested that over-dramatizing Meghan's distress would backfire. Harry was adamant. If Meghan's wish to be equated with Diana was not satisfied, insisted Harry, he would probably lose her. Knaf acquiesced. So again, this shows that, this was the bombastic statement Harry made right after, calling out all the media, saying they were all racist. And so this connection to Diana, though, it was a way also to shield them from any criticism, because Meghan, as we'll see throughout these clips, hates any sort of criticism towards her. But if you enter into the public sphere, you open yourself to criticism. I know even just with this channel, just having this channel, I open myself up to criticism, which I've gotten from people. Some of it, has some merit. A lot of it is just kind of, nasty people saying bad things on the internet. But that is what happens when you put yourself out into the public. But Meghan is a control freak. And Harry, because he was so desperate for her, and I don't know, maybe she had some magic over him, I don't know. He was desperate to do anything to please her. However, again, Harry and Meghan are their own worst enemies. So Harry and Meghan said that the press were harassing Meghan, they were stalking her, they were doing all these terrible things to her, and then she goes and does this. Richard Kay, the Daily Mail's senior royal writer, was strolling outside his newspaper's office in Kensington High Street. To his surprise, he spotted Meghan. Until then, no one realized that she was in London, following her back from Kensington's most expensive food shop, carrying a bulging bag adorned with the slogan, "Alleviate Poverty," to Kensington Palace. Kay concluded that if Harry and Meghan were living together, their relationship was more serious than anyone had previously realized. But I also will say, if Meghan was visiting London and Harry was her boyfriend, and especially after the news broke, I don't know why she would stay in a hotel when they were obviously sleeping together and they could go together in Nottingham. So I don't think she was like living there, because she was obviously still living in Canada. But like, it made sense for her when she came to London to stay at his place. It just kind of makes sense. But this next bit, and this always again was one of the red flags to me when Harry and Meghan's news was first announced, is that Meghan was courting the press. So you can't complain about the press being intrusive when you're deliberately courting them and, you know, walking around with a necklace that has H&M on it. And in this particular instance, this was like one of the first things that caught my eye, is this sweater of a Union Jack flag that was over her dog. And I was like, oh my gosh, Harry got that for her. You know, she posted this on Instagram. She is playing to the masses and to the press with this picture. And it says, tellingly, Meghan confirmed Kay's suspicions. Despite her new anger about social media, she posted a photo of herself on Instagram wearing a necklace with M and H, and her dog wearing a Union Jack jumper. My cup runneth over, Meghan told a Vancouver newspaper, and I'm the luckiest girl in the world. She described herself as an aspirational girl next door, a brash American, and mentioned that her mother had always cautioned her to dress less sexily because she should never give the milk away for free. Palace officials were confused as journalists were incredulous. Meghan was simultaneously castigating and feeding the media. And again, this goes back to this whole thing of Harry and Meghan just being general hypocrites. They're criticizing the media, yet they're feeding the media. And as a royal girlfriend, generally, and this is pretty much across the board, you are not supposed to feed the media if you can avoid it, because that's not your job. You're not a celebrity. You are a royal. And Meghan, though, kind of like I detailed in my last video, she was utterly focused on Hollywood. Hollywood, Hollywood, Hollywood. That is all Meghan ever wanted, was to be acknowledged and respected by Hollywood. Even if it came at the expense of the British royal family, even though she married into the British royal family. No, that's not good enough for her. The only thing that's good enough for her is if Hollywood finally puts her name over the Hollywood sign or something to that effect. That is her kind of mission in life. And Harry is just a casualty of that mission. So when Harry and Meghan kind of first as well, you know, invited some guests to Sandringham, so all his friends came out, and I did a video on this, and I don't think I actually got around to editing it because there's so many things that kept coming up. And I did a longer video on that too. And so this was part in the Times of London piece. And so it talks about how basically all Harry's friends thought he was nuts. Like other shooting weekends, Harry was looking forward to the endless banter, jokes, and a lot of drinking. He had not anticipated Meghan's reactions. Their jokes involving sexism, feminism, and transgender people ricocheted around the living rooms and dining rooms. Without hesitation, Meghan challenged every guest whose conversation contravened her values. According to Harry's friends, again and again, she reprimanded them about the slightest inappropriate nuance. Nobody was exempt. Harry's world would not be her world. Beyond Harry's hearing, his friends questioned Meghan's wokery. Meghan was a dampener on the party, they concluded. She lacked any sense of humor. Driving home after Sunday lunch, the text pinged between the cars. OMG, what about her, said one. Harry must be effing nuts, and she's a total nightmare, were the others. So this I think is very, very sad. Obviously, some people can say, oh, you know, those guys at the shooting party, they were just awful. Probably they were saying these terrible jokes. I'm one of the people who believes that comedy has mostly died because you can't say anything without offending anyone anymore. And if you can't offend people, if you can't make a joke, then what is funny? And obviously Meghan can't act, so I don't think she really knows what comedy is anyways, except for, of course, her disastrous appearance on Ellen. She is fully fine to make an absolute fool of herself on national television if it'll give her a chance to be on the Ellen show, but she can't take a joke. So Again, this shows that Harry and Meghan's worlds are colliding here. And instead of Harry just kind of backing away and saying, well, does this woman really fit into my life? He was willing to change everything to please her. And she was doing all this in part because there was something she really, 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 really wanted: publicity. Once again, Meghan's attitude towards the media dictated her relationship with Harry. She craved publicity, but only on her terms. Any reports or photographs which were not wholeheartedly uncritical and personally approved by her and her California publicists were deemed hostile. Total control was essential. She appeared unwilling to accept that her demands were futile in London. So one of the greatest lessons you can learn in life is that you are not in control. You are just not. Things will happen. You know, you were planning on sunshine and it rained. You were planning on rain and the sun came out. You were expecting to go to the grocery store today and your dog threw up and you can't go, or your kid threw up, something like that. Life is not in your control. And for control freaks, this is very scary. But there is some maturity again in recognizing that you are not in control. And in this situation, Meghan could always have control because she was so small fish, nobody cared. But once you get onto the royal stage, every nuance of your life will be gone through. And the reason is you are being paid for by the taxpayers. Your life is not your own anymore. If you marry into the royal family, you marry the state, you marry the country. And that should be seen. I mean, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's definitely not for everybody, but that is an honor and it's a privilege. And Meghan just could not seem to understand that, could not seem to get that through her mind. And she, again, it was all about Hollywood, Hollywood, Hollywood. And poor Harry, all he is doing is trying to bend over backwards to please her, but of course she's never ever happy, really. Insiders were less sure. Harry, they noticed, was influenced by Meghan's Californian lifestyle. Although she was no longer a passionate reader, I doubt she ever was that much of a reader, but anyways. William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, she said, was the most influential book she had read. She had given him 8 Steps to Happiness and The Motivation Manifesto, 2 American books about inspiration and life's choices. He appeared to have absorbed their message. Gradually, his language had become less English, less military. So again, for me, any person in a relationship, there should be massive red flags if somebody is changing everything about themselves. You know, I think obviously partners influence each other. Of course, that's part of being in a relationship. But it also sounds like as well, Harry is leaving his identity at the door and trying to adopt the one that she created for him. Because again, Meghan creates identities. When I went over my video yesterday, she basically clasped onto the identity of her TV show character, because Meghan just doesn't have that much of an identity on her own because she's a narcissist. So she just kind of mimics what's around her rather than really developing her own deep character. So again, she's kind of pushing that onto Harry as well. And Harry is adopting some of those same sentiments. In those early weeks, Meghan enjoyed the pomp and illusion of aristocratic power. She assumed the Windsors could not ignore her professional success. Compared to the Californian actress who had successfully overcome the traumas of her parents' divorce and survived the struggle to establish her career, Kate appeared to have smoothly glided towards the apex of British society. A few hiccups could not compare to the humiliation of the insecure actress, suddenly aware that the flop film Antisocial was about to be re-released in London. A recut trailer featuring her emerging from the shower to kiss a boyfriend. So again, Meghan she wanted this control. She wanted all this royalty stuff on her terms. But once again, you marry into this, or you're thinking about marrying into it, you give up a lot of your freedoms. Now again, if Harry and Meghan wanted to leave on their own and said, you know, Harry was like, you know what, this isn't good for us, then they should have done that. But that it got as far as the wedding and about 1.5 years of royal engagements shows that there was really another motivation behind them staying, and that was to get that gosh darn title. Because again, Meghan is really nothing without the royal title, because she doesn't really have that much talent on her own. The favorable media coverage excited Meghan. Drawing comparisons with Kate, one writer reported that unlike Meghan, the Duchess of Cambridge was too formal and not as glamorous. dressed. Reflecting with her staff in Kensington Palace on her popularity, Meghan credited her success with being uniquely special, an attitude reinforced by Harry. Diana's stardust, Harry suggested, was falling onto Meghan. None of Meghan's staff volunteered that only by being a member of the royal family was Meghan special. Less than 1 month after the engagement was announced, one member of the staff asked herself, "She'll be famous, but will she be royal?" So again, these fractures are already starting to emerge. And this is even just right after their engagement. People are wondering, can she really do this? Does she even understand the difference between celebrity and royalty? Because she caught Harry. She managed to grab him, but she doesn't really understand the full implications of where she's at and what she's doing. And there's some real danger there. So this is to kind of backtrack a bit because I missed this one. I kind of my pictures and my notes got jumbled, but I thought this was really interesting. This goes back again to the Jamaica wedding of Skippy Inskip and his wife, and how everybody was kind of like, they weren't so sure about Meghan and they didn't really like her, and she made them nervous for Harry because as real friends, they had genuine concern for his well-being. It says, over the following weeks, Harry's friends agreed that he was rushing too fast towards marriage. Uneasy about the influence on Harry of the woman who had suddenly walked into their lives, their instincts warned them to beware of the intruder. Several shared their fears with William. Inskip was among the first to tell Harry to be cautious. Best to be sure, he said. William spoke next. Don't feel like you need to rush this, he said to his brother. Take as much time as you need to get to know the girl. After all, he had known Kate for 8 years before he proposed. And you have to understand as well, the aristocratic set in the UK is, and even throughout most of the rest of Europe, is very, very insular. Usually they kind of marry each other. It's very rare that they actually go outside that bubble, and they're very, very protective of their own. So there's not a ton of leaks from Catherine and William's camp because most of their friends are aristocrats. And there is kind of an unspoken rule that you just don't blab. And I'm sure they have people who give leaks from time to time and people who share things. But for the most part, because all these people value their privacy so highly, and many of them have to a certain extent because their families have these huge long connections in the UK, have been on the national stage since their birth, since they were children, and they run all in these circles. Again, they become very much like an extended family to each other. And so that, you know, this, like that there was this intruder. I mean, they were very concerned about who Meghan was and what her intentions were because it impacts not only Harry and them, but their families and their children. And so there are, of course, very real concerns. And again, going back to the Jamaica wedding, photographer apparently jumped out from the bushes and Harry just went into a rage. Although he was wearing a swimming costume, he became incandescent. Harry's friends were puzzled by his particularly violent outbursts, considering the frequency of similar previous incidents in his life. Their suspicion of Meghan increased. The sentiment was mutual. Meghan disliked Inskip and his crowd. Their jokes and their attitude towards the world were unacceptable to her. The photographs were never published. So what I want to point out here as well, and why I really like that quote, is that it shows that Meghan kind of preyed on the insecurities of Harry and magnified them to 11. She made him so paranoid about her leaving that, you know, anything would set him off. And again, not a healthy dynamic at all. And for a guy who obviously lost his mother, has some severe issues as well, this is not a good sign for their relationship and for Harry's mental state. This I thought was really interesting as well when it comes to Doria. So I know a lot of people kind of go, you know, oh, poor Doria, you know, she's kind of stuck into this. She seems so nice and blah, blah, blah. I am not of that camp because to me, obviously the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. There's problems in the Markle camp and I'm sure there's problems in the Raglan camp. I mean, every family has its issues. That's not what I'm saying, but there's something just strange about, because to me, what it seems particularly evident is that Meghan keeps around people who stick to her party line. They follow her directives. So the reason why Meghan didn't allow Harry to meet Thomas, I think in part is that Thomas would probably share a different narrative than Meghan had shared with Harry. And I think she knew her mom would follow the party line and lie for her as necessary. So this says, Doria's past was reported to be shrouded in mystery. While she currently worked as an older adult therapist at a Los Angeles charity, the records showed that she had faced eviction while unemployed. No one can explain why Meghan had lived throughout her school years with Thomas. Where was Doria? Journalist asks during those 10 years. And I will still say, after reading the book, it's still unclear exactly what she was doing. She, at some point, I think Meghan was around 5, just packed up and said, well, I'm going to start this business, and here's Meghan. So obviously Meghan has a huge mother wound as well, and I think, and yeah, so it's just strange. And so, you know, to me, there's kind of hinkiness on all sides, because again, we can't trust Meghan's recollection of events at all, because she even said recently in court, you know, that her truth is basically subjective. She said that in court in a case with Samantha Markle. The truth is subjective. Well, if the truth is subjective, then what is the truth? And can we trust your truth as every truth is subjective? That's a huge question mark for sure. So once Meghan was Harry proposed to Meghan, he had proposed to her, he needed to ask the Queen, and obviously they kind of fast-tracked it. Bauer doesn't say this in the book, but there's a lot of rumors that basically Harry told the royal family that he would basically say that they were racist if they didn't welcome Meghan into the royal family. So they were really kind of screwed. They had to welcome her, or Harry would say, well, they were racist towards her. And so this says, during the first weeks, any tension passed unnoticed. As at Harry's request to cement Meghan into the family, palace officials swiftly encouraged the impression that Kate's close relationship with Harry would automatically extend to the trio to become the Fab Four. So the monarchy at this point as well. So this is a very peculiar time in the monarchy, because Philip's about to retire. So Catherine and William will have to pick up more royal engagements. And I get it. They are pretty work shy compared to the rest of European royals. But I also understand as well, they really want to give their kids the best foundation possible before basically they're thrust onto the world stage. And most of the other younger royals in Europe, they're direct in line, or they're even ruling. So I kind of understand a bit of their hesitation, and that they wanted to take some of their time, but as well, they really needed to do more. But they were really relying on this Fab Four idea. But Harry at this time as well, it was really becoming evident to him that he was the spare and that his time was limited. Harry then turned to his most significant revelation, highlighting that his role as the spare had disappeared. He admitted, I feel there is just a smallish window when people are interested in me before William's children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, and then Prince Louis, take over. And I've got to make the most of it. Anticipating insignificance, he repeated his hope that he would make something of his life, or he would consider turning his back on privilege, because he wanted out of the royal family to live an ordinary life. Well, an ordinary life is basically subjective. Everybody has a different life. Do you want to live a normal life, an ordinary life in Africa, in Asia, in the United States, in, you know, South America, something like that? All of those, and I mean, there's obviously different pockets even within those countries of immense affluence and wealth and immense poverty. So ordinary is everybody's individual experience. You can make your life ordinary even if you're royal. It's your ordinary though. So, but looking at this as well is that Harry, I think, is desperate to have he wants a vision for himself. And I mean, he had the Invictus Games, he had all these different things, so he had a lot going for him. So I kind of get, and at the time when I first heard some of those statements, I thought, you know what? He is recognizing the limitations of his role. And I thought that was healthy for him, because he will be the spare. He will be less significant as time goes on. But if you are smart, if you play your cards well, you can still be a huge asset to the monarchy. Look at Princess Anne, look at Prince Edward and his wife Sophie. They are all still dedicated working members of the royal family, and very much have great respect for the work that they do. But Harry, I think, because of Meghan's influence, started really wanting the flash. Because again, he is a weak-willed man, and he wanted a woman to save him. Rather than him saving himself, he wanted somebody else to come and save him from, you know, what he thought was his mundane life, rather than appreciating what he had and growing. Considering the importance of making a mixed-race woman welcome, Cohen's team tactfully sought to understand Meghan's concerns, her priorities, and how her ambitions could be realized. For hours, they discussed resolutions to problems and how she should feel as part of the royal family. In response, Meghan was insistent that she would not allow Buckingham Palace to shape her. She would remain independent. She did not want the firm to dictate her thoughts and activities. There was a certainty in her attitude. Few underestimated the elephant in the room, Meghan's resolutely independent attitude, but no one anticipated the battle to come. The courtiers expected her to join the society with unquestioned loyalty to the crown. And like in any monarchy, loyalty trumps all. Everybody works for the crown. It's not for you personally, it's for the crown and the monarch, because that's how monarchies work. That's how they all work. This is not like rocket science, but Meghan just refused to understand that. And you know, their whole job is to support the queen. And Meghan, all she wanted was self-promotion. She just wanted to push herself. And Harry really started to go along for this ride. After scrutinizing her TV interview, this was shortly after the engagement, Stephen Glover, a cautious observer, identified Meghan's skill of self-promotion, and that with her acute commercial brain, she is far from being a shrieking violet. If Meghan has embarked on a mission to promote brand Markle, suggested Glover, she was destined to conflict with the cautious brand Windsor. He concluded, the last thing the royal family needs is a vocal activist from across the pond noisily embracing global causes. And again, this is exceptionally true because the monarchy needs to be more insular focused, and then they can concentrate on some global issues as well. William with his Earthshot Prize is a great example of that. But they have to approach these issues very cautiously, and Meghan just didn't care. And there's a reason, I guess, Meghan did really want children. I always question whether or not Meghan would have had children without, you know, needing them to get alimony, which sounds so terrible, but that's always kind of what I thought her speed was. But as it turns out, there was a deeper motivation. Meghan, despite even having the connection to Harry, was not getting any acting offers. And it sounds like they were at least trying to get her some acting offers, and nothing was coming through. This was going to be really hard, Harry would later reflect on establishing Meghan's place in the family. One of his recurring concerns was insufficient money if they married. Although Harry annually received about £1.5 million from Charles, Meghan had been advised to continue acting to supplement their income. By that point, Meghan knew from her agent Nick Collins that her acting prospects were limited. Omen Scobie, her official biographer, would accurately summarize her exit from Hollywood. She wanted a more meaningful career, he wrote. She could be doing more with her platform. Her frustration remained. She was tantalizing close to sealing her future, but nothing was official. Also says, considering her new life and the need to refresh the series, Aaron Korsh, the writer of Suits, planned to write Meghan out of the series at the end of the 2017 season. The news for Meghan from her agent Nick Collins was not encouraging. No film producer was offering her any major roles, and no serious Hollywood director spoke about featuring Meghan in his movie or his new TV series. Just as she feared, her acting career was stymied. Her income after 2017 would plummet. This was part of the motivation. Apparently Meghan did want kids, but she also realized that she chose a career that she had no future in because she couldn't act, and she did not try hard enough to make herself better at her craft. Ergo, once her beauty, so, you know, there's a Bible verse, beauty is fleeting. So Meghan's beauty is fleeting. She's over 40 now, and not that women can't be gorgeous after 40, absolutely they can. But when it comes to acting, especially, it's always younger that they go for. It's unfair, but that is generally the case. You're always chasing the kind of your youth as a Hollywood actress. But after a certain age as well, generally you need to be able to act. If you can't act, you're not going to get any parts after a certain period of time because nobody's going to hire you because you're just a pretty face. And the pretty face thing only lasts for so long, and then it's done. And so when they did obviously the Fabulous Four kind of, or the Fab Four kind of meeting of the Royal Foundation, you know, they were, the palace was pushing this Fab Four narrative because they're kind of trying to rebrand as Philip was retiring. Obviously the Queen is, you know, at that time, you know, she was still doing well, but obviously now her health is fading. So they were really trying to figure out what was the brand of Windsor moving forward. And so the Fab Four was a huge part of that. but there were almost immediate tensions. And so when they did this kind of huge kind of meeting of the minds and this kind of presentation, Catherine was pregnant. She was also wearing a $99 dress while Meghan was wearing a $1,500 outfit or a $1,500 jumper. So part of the thing too is I think Harry and Meghan could have lived very, very comfortably on 1.5 million pounds, but Meghan demanded luxury. She was marrying a royal. She demanded Hermes, Prada, Gucci, Chanel, Dior constantly. And those things you only have so much of a budget, and she could not live like an empress on the budget of a duchess. So, but anyways, going back to this kind of Fab Four meeting, it says, while Meghan spoke, Harry spotted William's rictus grin. Virtue signaling from a platform ignored the royals' role impartially to foster national unity. She had not been invited to join the Royal Foundation to reinvent the royal family's customs. Meghan, William silently feared, did not understand that the public expected mystique, not familiarity. Was she trying to upstage Kate? Did she realize that there was a pecking order in the constitutional monarchy? As hard as she might try, Meghan could not win because Kate would be the queen, and Meghan would remain a duchess. Had Harry ever explained to Meghan that royal protocol meant that they would always walk behind William and Kate? Had Harry dared to explain his diminishing role in the royal family? Or had he avoided that truth out of fear of losing Meghan? And again, I think that's incredibly telling about where Harry's mindset was. Meghan had him so twisted, so caught up in the web that she wove, that he was worried that because he was diminishing in influence, he knew now he was sixth in line for the throne. He was not as important as he once was. You could almost feel the jealousy towards his niece and nephews, that they were now the spares, that he just wasn't as important as anymore. And part of the attraction for Meghan clearly was his importance and his ability to make her money. That was a huge thing that Harry seemed to know about them. And I think that's incredibly sad that Harry felt so insecure that he had to change everything and seem to be, this was part of the catalyst, the growing catalyst to leave for Megxit, is because Meghan demanded more than Harry could give. And I think that's incredibly sad that Harry, being a prince, being the grandson of the queen, wasn't good enough for Meghan. It wasn't good enough. He needed to make her more money. He needed to be a bigger star than the rest of the British royals because she is a star. And ergo, if he is higher up, then she is higher up and she is more important because she, again, can't do it on her own. She can't do it on her own. She's not being invited to speak at as many things as Harry is. I'm sure she wanted to speak at the Nelson Mandela event, but no, they wanted Harry because they want the prince. So Meghan has caught herself, I think, too, now in a conundrum, whereas she wanted this power and influence, but she will always be second best to her husband who has the royal connection, the royal blood. And that's just kind of how it is. Because again, Meghan has never done anything herself besides chase the cloud of other people to bring herself ahead. So when it comes to the wedding, obviously Thomas Markle wasn't there. He shared his side of the story with Tom Bower, basically saying that, he had had a heart attack. He couldn't make it. He was so sad that he couldn't. But I thought this was really interesting about Doria, because again, that somebody would go, Meghan has crafted this image. If somebody is going along with it, there's a reason why. And I thought this was really interesting. And again, this is just Thomas Markle's supposition. He said, Thomas Markle now suspected that Doria was forcing the division. At the same time, he believed Meghan had told Doria not to speak to Thomas. Doria was feeding anger and spite to Meghan, complained Thomas. Doria, he reluctantly believed, saw an opportunity that Meghan would pay off Doria's debts for college and also buy her a new car. For the first time, his calls to Doria were ignored. She's obeying Meghan's command. And to me, that kind of makes sense, because again, if you are connected to Meghan Markle, and if you are considered her friend, you must follow the narrative. You must follow the narrative. Harry is even roped into that now. You must follow the narrative, regardless if it's true or not. It's, whatever she thinks is true. So you have to follow it. So if you follow it, there are benefits to it. And I think Doria maybe perhaps is reaping the benefits of that. But I'll end on this note. So Patrick Jepson, this is Diana's former private secretary, he said, was also concerned by Harry's conviction that Meghan had much in common with Diana. That illusion, Jepson believed, was dangerous, as Diana and Fergie discovered, warned Jepson. Meghan should not overestimate her worth. As a newcomer to the dynasty business, her sole purpose was to preserve the monarchy as the focus of national unity. The Windsors would be ruthless against any threat posed by an aggressor. Jepson knew Diana better than Harry. He had seen her spread happiness, but he had also witnessed her weaknesses. Working outside the system, Diana ignored advice, kept her officials in the dark, and as a loose cannon beyond anyone's control, was eventually cast out. Meghan, Jepson feared, was replicating Diana's worst characteristics, not, as Harry believed, her best characteristics. So guys, I think that is basically at the heart of it. Harry, a deeply broken man, was caught in a web by a woman who kind of mimicked his mother, but not her best qualities, but her worst ones. And she dragged him into her vision for their life rather than him casting the vision for his life. Because if he's living her dream rather than his, that is going to cause friction. That's going to cause a lot of friction. And that's not something that's going to be ameliorated by, some social media posts and a spa day or anything like that. If he has to follow her vision for their life at all times, that's just gonna irritate him. That's just gonna be annoying, obnoxious, so many different things and it's a recipe for disaster. Because at the end of the day, your life should be, even if you are in a couple, and obviously sometimes, partners, somebody has a job, somebody has to go somewhere, and you have to move together, and it's not everybody's idea. I think it's clear as well that Meghan grasped on, had no desire to try to emulate or even try to get into Harry's world. She wanted to divide him from it from the get-go. That was her sole purpose, was to divide him and get him to Hollywood as quickly as possible. And we'll see how they go through that in the next episode. So yes, I have 2 more planned, and so hopefully I can get this together. And so because it's a lot of editing, but thankfully I have all my kind of pictures and my quotes together, so hopefully it should go rather quickly. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys again very, very soon. Bye.